Greetings, everyone. I am the Hipster Snek. Fans of series like Final Fantasy know just how jarring it can be for sequels to be released out of order or for titles in a series to be flat out skipped in favor of later installments. Cue a similar confusion when my good buddy World Tree Cycles recommended 7 Dragon 3 code VFD for the Nintendo 3DS. I bought it, played it, and I loved it, but it demanded the question, what happened to 7th Dragon 1 and 2? As it turns out, I really should have been asking, what happened to 7th Dragon 1, 2020, and 2022? But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm not necessarily recommending any action be taken, but I will casually mention, as an aside, that there is a fan translation project for localized 7th Dragon for the original Nintendo DS, and it's absolutely worth playing. Mind, I'm not advocating anything in particular, other than Sega give its properties more love and consider an official release that we fans of the series can support in the English-speaking world. That aside, 7th Dragon opens in a swords and sorcery setting as you form your own team of hunters in order to tackle various woes plaguing the NPC population of the world of Eden. Wow, that really has more ties to my last review than I considered. The game looks great. It uses this stylized, super deformed look for the player characters and really smooth animations, giving each class its own distinct personality alongside their myriad skills. The monsters look super cool, particularly the dragons you'll encounter throughout the game. And obviously, yes, there's dragons in 7th Dragon. Shocking, I know. Each looks distinct, and at a glance you can probably guess what each will specialize in. The portraits for the unique characters you meet are really well done. It sort of makes me laugh to imagine our Peanuts-esque gang of heroes standing opposite these really detailed anime portraits, though. The sound is also pretty good. Most actions like attacks and spells have very distinct audio cues all their own, and the music is solid through and through. It suits the mood wherever you find yourself, be it caves, dungeons, cities, or moving across the overworld. I will confess that sometimes you might want to put on your own music if you're level grinding, but it's still great nonetheless. Now, let's dig into the gameplay, which, if you've ever happened to play Etrian Odyssey, might feel just a tiny bit familiar, but I digress. I must say, I really love games like this, where you get to build your own party from ground up. There's a cast of 4 heroes you get to build and customize. There's 7 classes to pick from, and you can even have extra allies on standby and swap them out as you need. I don't do this, but I'm obsessive, and I like to keep my main party as close to the same level as possible. But that gives you plenty of room for customizing and setting it up exactly the way you want it. You pick their class, their portraits, and their names. Repeat 3 additional times at least, and you have a party. Let's get to tackling those various woes, like delivering a package to the kingdom next door, or handing off a pair of garden shears, or collecting monster teeth. You know, on the onset, it doesn't seem like hunters are in very high demand right now, but in my own head, I imagine that's because my party doesn't have any actual useful, marketable skills, and this is all they could do. After a brief prologue that teaches you how to accept quests from the quest counter, which is actually one of the worst systems in the game, and it's the one major thing I'll actually ding the game on. Yeah, actually, let me derail and talk about this for a moment. It's too big to ignore. To accept main and side quests, you have to accept them from the guild hall, and then ultimately cash them in the same way. There is literally no reason for a company as old and experienced with JRPGs like Sega, or as on hardware as new as the Nintendo DS, that these functions should not be controlled automatically. Add in the fact that you can only have 3 side quests active at a time, and getting and cashing them in is a huge amount of sidetracking every time it comes up. It results in a game that, once you get out of the starting gate, you might as well just ignore side quests. They're just a huge, flow-breaking pain in the butt. To say nothing of the fact that, with 1 or 2 exceptions, none of the rewards are ever really worth it once you get into the grind of it. It makes for a system that's clunky and inefficient to use and isn't rewarding for your time. While the Red Tree fast travel system alleviates this a little bit, several towns, even major ones, don't have the right counter to accept certain quests from. This is entirely too much backtracking involved because they decide to include this system in the game. It feels like I'm a child on a curfew, and every couple dozen dragons I kill, I have to go home and report to my mama Snek about what I'm doing, where I'm going, and who I'm doing it with. It's such a small thing, but it adds up to such a huge hassle in the long run of the game. There was a time where I just killed a major boss encounter and was wandering from town to town trying to figure out why everyone in the game was talking about my wild success, and yet nobody was telling me what to do next. And then I find out they needed me to go to the guild hall, the guild with the main quest counter, which, as I said, not every city has, and then file the proper paperwork before the game acknowledged the boss was even dead. How stupid is that? Thankfully, future installments of the series do correct this issue. Okay, that one bad thing out of the way, let's talk about how much this game rocks. After the prologue, the world's invaded by 666 dragons. Nope, sorry, got another rant, gotta get it out of the system. A small one this time, I promise. 666 is not the number of the beast, or the end times, or what have you. It's the number of Caesar Nero. Nero was, I suppose one might say, draconian, but this stupid trope really needs to die off already. It's not edgy, it's just dumb and perpetuates a historical misunderstanding. Okay, back to how much this game rocks, because it absolutely does in every way. Let's get to talking about those dragons, shall we? The dragons in this game range from common fodder to mid-bosses and further still to the biggest, baddest bosses you'll encounter in the game, and the dragon meter acts to reflect how many of them you remove from this world. The upside of there being so many is that you really feel accomplished watching that number drop further and further, ever closer to zero. They're exciting to battle and tend to reward the player with a lot of XP and rare items, even expensive vendor trash. Oh yeah, I should mention that. Vendor trash in 7th Dragon is how the game explains why killing monsters gets you money in the first place. You'll sell economically and commercial viable materials from your kills. This doubles as a way for shops to improve and sell progressively better gear. If that sounds really familiar right about now, maybe you played the aforementioned Etrian Odyssey? Well, as a result, a lot of your backpack will constantly be used for monster mats, and a big part of any particular expedition will be balancing those monster drops with how many healing items you want to have on hand. For this reason, I consider the healing class invaluable in any team formation. As you level up, you'll get points to put into your skill trees, which unlock and strengthen abilities from each class as they grow. Using these progressively stronger abilities, you'll tackle even greater threats. XP from those unlocks more abilities and more gear for the team to use. And so the through line to adventure is now established. The only downside is, as you go, there are side areas populated with monsters and dragons of indeterminate level scaling. Especially once you get the ability to sail around the ocean, it can become a bit too easy to run headlong into an area where the monsters are way more powerful than you without even meaning to. But I suppose that is what running away is for. Just be sure to save often, and you shouldn't be in too much danger. To give you an example of almost the reverse, when I first got to the Western continent, there was a dungeon that was supposed to be tagged for level 40 adventurers to explore, but I misread the font and read it as being for level 48 adventurers. So when I returned, then over level 50, it was almost too easy. And it also contained a really good sword for my knight that I had missed all that time. Moral of the story, when in doubt, read the notice a second time. As you probably noticed by now, the world is also filled with these fiery red flower things that deal damage to you when you walk through them, though some special abilities do negate this. That's the Bloom, a plant meant to weaken and kill the inhabitants of Eden for the dragon's benefit. You can manually stomp it out, where it takes some amount of in-game days to attempt to regrow, much like how a weed can regrow from its roots. You'll want to consider doing this to ease travel on the overworld or remove swaths of it by felling high dragons, who rule over small areas of the world map. Ultimately, you want to remove the bloom and the dragons from the world, though dragons play dirty. On the overworld, they have a physical presence, unlike the random encounters. They'll each display different sets of behavior depending on their type. Some will follow patrol routes, some will rush you upon seeing you, and others will have different behaviors beyond that. But on top of all that, as you're engaged in other battles, the dragons will attempt to close in on you, even knocking lesser monsters out of their way to have a go at you in a continuous chain battle. This can result in 3 or 4 dragons forming a Congo line to have a go at you as soon as the mechanic is introduced if you aren't careful. Smartly manipulating these predatory instincts are the way that you can battle the dragons on your own terms. There are numerous strategies depending on how you build and customize your party, so you can play to your strengths. This actually leads to another interesting mechanic, reflective of the dragons being this bizarre, utterly alien race of almost insect-like creatures. They can regenerate. If you don't kill the high dragon and spend too many in-game days attempting to prune the bloom and thin the dragons, they'll respawn in their original places and continue to try to hunt you down. Now, this does act as a double-edged sword in some ways, as adding more fights does mean additional challenges, but also gives the player the chance to level up in places where they're struggling by battling the same dragons again. This gives the player the ability to pace their treks through new areas and size up threats effectively without taking end-running risks all in one go. It's a great bit of story and gameplay integration that makes the overall feel of the game a bit more player-friendly. I will be honest though, the game is brutally hard right out of the gate. You'll need to spend some time front-loading your team by grinding for levels, skills, and gear before you can confidently begin tackling the first dragons and subsequently larger targets. Though once you reach the mid-game, grinding will become largely unnecessary, and you'll keep pace to the game's own natural difficulty curve if you're making it a point to kill as many dragons as possible, which you should, seeing as how that is the point of the game. Ultimately, 7th Dragon feels, in many ways, like Sega was trying to make its own Etrian Odyssey. As World Tree Cycles put it, it's a small girl wearing her mother's dress, makeup, and jewelry, trying to be just like her instead of trying to find her own identity. Later installments of the series do recraft many of the game's mechanics to have their own unique spin, but we'll touch on those another time. While some things may be a nuisance over the course of gameplay, that doesn't stop 7th Dragon from being an amazing experience front to back. And with 666 dragons to remove, it'll keep you driven to the very end. Should you get the chance to play it, you absolutely should. This has been the Hipster Snek, and if you like this video, please hit that like button every time. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe and bell icon below to always know when new content's coming. If you want to fund my campaign against the spaceborne astral horror dragons, you can even become a backer at my Subscribe Star page, link in the description. Join me next time as we enter a surreal and very yellow zone to shut it all off. See you there.